Hey folks, so in my last video, I talked about how my friends and I are doing this really fun book club right now where we are going through Wine Simple by Aldo Somm. And it's such a great resource if you are, a beginner and looking to learn more about wine, which a lot of my friends are. And I've honestly just had so much fun having this as a book club, and we get together for tasting parties, and what's not to love when you're drinking wine with friends. But the reason I was inspired for this video series that I'm doing right now is because Aldo Somm has this really cool infographic in his book about all the different places on your palate that you taste and experience wine. And in my last video, I talked about acidity in a wine. And acidity is the mouth-watering, drooling sensation you get when you have an acidic wine. You get that puckering sensation, almost as if you would just bit into a lemon. It's very, I find acidic wines to be super refreshing, super food-friendly, and just overall wonderful. But there are three other elements when it comes into talking about the structure of a wine and how it tastes on your palate, and that is tannins, sweetness, and alcohol. And for today, we're going to be talking about tannins. And tannins are specific to red wine in particular. And the reason why I'm really excited to talk about tannins today is that it is very common for people to confuse tannins with dryness in a wine. And I personally, I know a ton about wine, and I also find it to be a bit confusing. I feel like there needs to be different terminology established in the wine community, but it is what it is. So let's dive in. So tannins are naturally occurring compounds that you get in the stems, the seeds, and the skins of grapes. And the reason why you really only get tannins in a red wine is because those three S's, the stems, seeds, and skins, are fermented with the juice during the winemaking process of red wine. Now, if you are looking at a white wine, all of those three S's are pressed off prior to fermentation, so you don't get any of that skin contact, which will really is really what will cause there to be tannins in your wine. Now, tannins is a drying sensation you get on your palate. So if you take a sip of a red wine, you know what? I haven't drank yet, so I'm just gonna do it right now. Okay, if you're drinking a red wine and it has a good amount of tannins, you're gonna feel it on the center of your tongue, and it's gonna be a drying sensation. So it may taste bitter, it may taste astringent, but more than anything, it's gonna taste like you had just taken a cotton ball and put it in your mouth, and it's just gonna suck all that moisture out. So if you get an really, drying sensation the first sip you take, that means you are drinking a high tannin wine. And if you don't get that sensation, you're drinking a fairly low tannin wine. Now, the reason why it gets so often confused in the wine community is because tannins is a drying sensation on your palate. But so many wines are, in the wine community, they describe a dry wine as a wine that is, that doesn't have any residual sugar. So when you hear people, whether it's someone at a bottle shop or you're taking wine courses or you're at a bar and the person working there is talking about a dry style wine, they're talking about the absence of residual sugar. So they're talking about a wine that is not sweet. And the majority of what is on the market is not sweet unless you're looking at Rieslings, ports, cream sherries. For the most part, the majority of what's out there is a dry wine. So the reason why it's important not to confuse this is I've been in situations where I've gone to a bar with a girlfriend and she tells the bartender, hey, I really love dry style wines. That's not really giving them a huge indicator about what it is that you enjoy about wine, because the majority of what's out there, like I said, is dry style wine. But when I started asking her, what dry kind of meant to her, she said, oh, that drying sensation. And I had to explain to her that that was actually tannins that she enjoyed. And if she now goes to the bartender and says, hey, I'm looking for a high tannic red wine, they're gonna have a much better idea and be able to really narrow down the perfect wine for you. And once again, I think that that's the most important thing about wine is understanding your style preferences and the nuances that you really like in a wine, so that when you're at a restaurant, when you're at a bar, when you are at a bottle shop or the grocery store, you can point people to what it is that you really like about a wine, and they'll be able to pick out the best wine for you, because wine is expensive. And so you want to make sure that whatever bottle you're opening is one that you're going to enjoy. Otherwise, it's money wasted. And when you are looking at wines that are high in tannins, I would highly recommend checking out a few of my favorites that are super tannic. And those are Nebbiolo, so Borolo or Barbaresco from Italy. Also Cabernet Sauvignon, we got a ton of that on the market. If you want to, search out a high tannin wine, you will find one at your grocery store. Also Sangiovese is really high in tannins, and Tannat is another one that is a red varietal that is also very high in tannins. As finally, a Pinot Noir from the old world, like Burgundy, is going to have a great amount of tannins in it. So if you want to experiment to see if tannins are your jam, I would recommend checking out those wines that I just mentioned. Also, if you open a bottle of wine and you find the tannins to be a little too astringent, a little too bitter, and overall just really harsh, I would recommend decanting the wine for about 1 to 2 hours, because when you decant the wine, it'll expose it to oxygen and those tannins will really soften on your palate. And so trust me, it is worth the wait if you are finding that those tannins are a little too harsh immediately out of the bottle. Also, it's important to discuss what to pair tannic wines with. And for me, I absolutely love high tannin wine when I pair it with a really fatty cut of red meat. I'm talking a bistro burger, or heck, a McDonald's burger, or a ribeye steak. And the reason is that I find when I have this drying sensation of tannins on my palate and I pair it with a fatty dish, the fat and the tannins kind of have this little party in my mouth, and they kind of turn the dryness of the tannins into this velvety, umptious sensation. And it's so delicious. It's almost like everything is kind of melting together on the palate. It's so tasty. So I would highly recommend that. And I think that's it. And once again, I'm so glad I broke this up into a 4-part video series, because I just talked about one element of wine and it's already a 7-minute video. So I apologize, and I hope this was helpful. And that's it. Okay.